Who-dats. Welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Nabors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanle.
Proud of these guys.
We've got to understand that our best game is still out there. In other words, I haven't seen it yet. I haven't played in it yet. We can still be a lot better.
Saints fans, that should put you in a good mood. That's Drew Brees after the Saints took care of the Buccaneers in a great bounce-back game, 34-17. No quarterback has beaten the Buccaneers more than number 9, Drew Brees. Welcome to another Been There, Done That podcast. I'm Mike Nabors. I'm going to bring in my teammates, producer Justin Thomas. How are you?
Pretty good.
And Scott Shanle, before we get to you, Justin, we got to bring back a little retro from last week.
Here we go.
All right. Here we go. I think Tampa Bay is going to win this one.
Oh, Shanle.
I think there's going to be some hangover a little bit with this team. They will get reinvigorated throughout the week. They're going to say, hey, we're going to run the ball. We're going to get back to run the football. Well, guess what? Tampa Bay has the number 1 rush defense in the NFL. And I think Tampa Bay's offense, there's been only one game where they've scored 17 points or less, and that was against the 49ers in the opening week of the season. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think Tampa Bay is going to win. They just went to Seattle and put up 40 points. This offense is going to be kind of a shootout. I'm going to say Tampa Bay 31, Saints 30.
Scott Shanle, we didn't replay it a couple weeks ago when I predicted the Bucs would beat the Saints. So I'm sorry about that. I will do that moving forward, but just having fun. You know what? This Buccaneer team, to me, is always kind of a wild card, but Shanle, I'll let you have the floor after that.
Yeah. I wish we could have the look on my face is what the heck was I thinking trusting Jameis Winston? That's what the look on my face says. I'm glad I was wrong, to be honest. I mean, it's one of those things where I thought that Tampa was kind of rolling a little bit, playing some of their better football. They have good players, but how many times do we always say that about Tampa Bay? Hey, they have good players. They have all these shiny pieces, and they go out and turn the ball over and just don't play fundamentally sound, good football and flip it on the other side. The Saints came out. Penalties maybe were still a little bit high, but they took advantage of the mistakes Tampa Bay made, and that's how you win games.
Shanley's always a good sport. I appreciate that. I thought he was going to say, I wish you could see the look on my face. So I want to come over there and strangle you, neighbor. But
it's one of those where you're glad you're wrong. I'm glad I'm wrong.
Well, the standings right now, I predicted the Bucs would beat the Saints early in the season, as I mentioned. But my record is 8-2. Shanle, you and Justin are now 6-4, but we still have many games left. And one thing I can't figure out is this NFC South, because all of a sudden the Atlanta Falcons are reborn. Carolina, to me, gets whooped by the Falcons, and we'll get to them in just a second. But this NFC South is very unpredictable this season in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think a lot of people had the Saints winning this thing. Nobody thought the Falcons would be off to a 1-7 start. But when you looked at the Falcons on paper, they have good players, and they're starting to play like it. You have to give those guys, and I hate giving Atlanta players and coaches credit, but a lot of teams at 1-7 would turn it in and say, hey, let's see if we can get Chase Young out of Ohio State and tank this thing. They beat the Saints, and they whooped the Carolina Panthers, who were playing good football. And now I think Carolina's kind of in that, which they seem to do under Rivera. They're kind of hitting that little tailspin moment. Kyle Allen's kind of telling on himself now. I'm not really worried about Carolina even making the playoffs. They have bigger concerns. Maybe they should start tanking for Tua. But NFC South, it's turning out the way we thought it would before the season even started.
All right, we'll get to the Carolina Panthers, who remarkably the Saints haven't played this season yet. They're done with the Bucs, swept those guys. 0-1 against the Falcons. They'll get them again on Thanksgiving coming up. But the first game against Carolina, we'll talk to in just a second. And we're also going to talk about Michael Thomas. It's unbelievable the season he's putting up. It's almost like we expected, but I think he's definitely the best wide receiver in the NFL. I think we all agree. We'll talk about him and get Drew Brees' thoughts in our one-on-one with him after the Bucs game. But let's recap the game that was in Tampa. I mean, I thought, Shanle, they established the running game. They would have liked to convert, some touchdowns. They got field goals early, but it seemed like time of possession was huge. It's almost like they had the ball the whole first half in that game.
Well, the one thing I give the Saints, Coach Payton especially, credit for is we all said after the Falcons game, how could you lose to Atlanta? Well, you lose to Atlanta when you only run the ball 10 or 11 times. And the Saints abandoned the run way too early against Atlanta, and Atlanta stuck with it, grounded out for 3 or 4 yards, got into good third down situations. Well, the Saints got back to their winning formula. And the big formula the last 2 years why this team has been good is they played good defense and they've been balanced on offense. They haven't asked Drew Brees to throw for 450 or 500 yards a game to help them win because frankly, when he did that, they were 8-8 every year. So they got back to their balance, controlling the game, setting up play action, keeping the defense on their heels. And I attribute that win at Tampa Bay. A lot of credit goes to the defense the way they played, but I attribute the win basically because the Saints went back and got to their balance on offense and ran the ball.
And I like the fact that afterwards, I will say this about Sean Payton. I always say that, he's better after a loss in terms of dealing with the media. You always get better stuff from Sean Payton after a loss. But after this win, Shanle, it was different. He answered every question. Sometimes people came in late, asking the same question. You can tell he felt good about that win and felt good about that football team moving forward. But I also say this about Sean Payton and Drew Brees, and you heard it in the open. They know there's better football out there. I mean, Payton said, we could have scored more points in that game. Brees said our best game. We haven't played yet. This team knows they're good, but they can be better, Scott.
Yeah, and that's what you're going to get from Coach Payton and Drew. They're both very competitive. I remember Coach Payton saying a lot of times, nobody's ever played the perfect game of football. Too many variables go on, but you're always looking to play the perfect game, and that's what keeps you awake at night when you're scheming. That's what keeps you awake at night as a player when you're watching game film or lifting weights. Those things, you're always striving to play the perfect game. So it doesn't surprise me. Both those guys felt like they could have played better, but when you look at it, and you've also heard Coach Payton say a win is a win, and in this league it's hard to win, but they know to beat the teams come playoff time. That's what's on everyone's mind is everybody knows the Saints team is a playoff team, but can you beat Green Bay? Can you beat Dallas? Can you beat Seattle? Can you beat those teams playing the way you did at Tampa? And that's why I think they made those comments.
Yeah, I just think, I love that Jared Cook is getting more involved, and when you have Kamara doing what he's doing, I mean, you got to get Michael Thomas some help. Let's get to Michael Thomas. I mean, whether it's Teddy or Drew, whether it's Latavius or Alvin, it's always been Michael Thomas this year. I mean, his numbers, the guy already has 94 catches, 1,141 receiving yards. I mean, that's a great season for any wide receiver. But that he still has so much more time. And Marvin Harrison has that record he set 17 years ago. It's hard to believe that was 17 years ago. 143 catches in one season. Shanle, I think Thomas has got a great shot at this record.
He's got a great shot at the record, and I hope the Saints keep winning so they get the number 1 seed, but I also hope they keep winning so that Michael Thomas's name gets thrown in this MVP discussion. I know It's a quarterback award. I know everyone's infatuated with Lamar Jackson, who's been outstanding, and Russell Wilson. But Michael Thomas, for me, everybody can say, well, he's got Drew Brees as quarterback. Well, look what he did for 6 weeks without Drew Brees as quarterback. And look what he did with games where there was no Kamara on the field and no Cook. He still caught 10-plus balls. That, to me, says more than anything about Michael Thomas being thrown into the discussion as the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, because no matter who's on the field, who's throwing the ball to him, who's playing around him, he still puts up these incredible numbers. And if it's possible, what impresses me about Michael is you see a lot of times guys lose their hunger. They get paid, they have a drop-off in a year. Michael's gotten better. Michael got a ton of money, and he's gotten better, and I think it speaks to the competitor that he is.
I think we all agree. Can we just go around the horn here, Justin, and you go first and then Shanle? Is Michael Thomas the best wide receiver in the NFL? I say yes. What do you say, Justin?
Are we basing on his full
production,
this year's production, or his over
just right now in the NFL? I think he's
definitely right now in the NFL. He is. Julio and DeAndre don't quite have the numbers, so I think you have to go with Michael being the best.
Shanle, is he the best in the NFL right now?
Yes, I think he is. And the way I look at it is if I'm a GM and I get to pick any wide receiver in the NFL, who do I take? There's a lot of great choices, a lot of great options. Julio Jones is getting older. The one knock against Michael, and I think this hurts him with a lot of people, and why he's not constantly mentioned as the number 1 wide receiver is because he doesn't make the plays down the field like Randy Moss and 4-3 wide receivers and making those pretty 60-yard gains. It's just not – they don't ask him to do that, but who cares? I mean, he still produces without doing those things, but everybody likes those elements to a wide receiver's game that you don't see often from Michael, but still he puts up incredible numbers and is reliable every single week.
And along those lines, Shanle, isn't it amazing how many magazine covers Odell Beckham has compared to Michael Thomas? I'll take Michael Thomas any day of the week over that guy.
Yeah, I mean, we can all be honest. And where would Odell Beckham be if you just thought about this? Where would he be if the one-handed backward leaning back catch never happened? You know, It would be interesting to know how his career would be different had that one play never happened to him. And it was an incredible play, and it'll live on forever. And kids around the nation, they talk about making an Odell. That's what a catch is. But I think one play made that guy's career. He's a good player, he really is, but he's not an elite receiver in my mind.
Plus, he's not a good team guy. And Thomas brings in all the intangibles. And let's bring back Drew Brees. I do a one-on-one with him after every game. And here's what he had to say on the greatness of Michael Thomas, because I get asked this question all the time. So I wanted to pose the question to Drew Brees.
Michael Thomas delivers each and every week. What makes him so good, Drew?
Just consistently, so doing everything really good on a consistent basis makes you great. I mean, that's and if you watched him prepare, if you watched him run every route in practice, you'd be like, okay, I get it. I know why he's so good. Because he plays every game, he plays every snap like it's a Super Bowl rep.
You play with a lot of guys, Shanle. I know you played on the defensive side of the ball, but is it rare to have a guy that good practice that way too, or is that why the great ones are good, because they do practice that way?
That's exactly right. The great ones are great because they practice that way. In every level of football, the guys get more talented, but it's really that hunger and that competitive nature that drive you, especially when you're talking about pro sports, where regardless if you win or lose, you're still getting paid. And a lot of guys, that's why you see a lot of busts, is because they don't have that competitive fire. They're playing for all the wrong reasons. And when we went to the NFC Championship game, I took my boys to the game, and I remember standing on the sideline, and Michael was warming up, working on toe drags, catching the ball on the sideline, and he was running some slants. And I just told my kids, watch how he warms up. And I asked him after the pregame, I said, what'd you think of him? And he's like, he warms up like it's the game. And that's just Michael Thomas. Like, everything is 100 miles an hour, and he's a great person to watch, great person for young kids to emulate.
Justin, that's why I love having Shanle on the podcast, because he always gives me the unexpected answer, not the stock answer, even after I called him out earlier, which I still feel guilty about. And next time I'm going to call myself out, or one of us, you or I, Justin. But that was good stuff. And you know what? Beyond that, Shanle, I think the great ones are hard on themselves too, and I addressed that with Drew Brees as well.
He's hard on himself too, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He expects to make every play, and that's what you love about him, because he looks at you and says, I'll get open, I'll catch it, I'll make the play, and even at times where it's like, Mike, it was the wrong coverage, but that's what you love. I mean, you love the fact that he wants the ball, he wants to make the play.
He just brings all the intangibles. So we didn't want to leave out talking about Michael Thomas, because this season, Shanle, it's been, when's Drew getting back? When's Kamara getting back? When's Jared Cook going to get involved? And Drew said it best. I actually tweeted this during the game, and it was funny that Brees said this afterwards when he was asking the stats of Michael Thomas at the post-game press conference, and he heard him, and he said, ho-hum. I mean, just another day at the office. But this team really respects what he does, but it shows in this year of injuries and ever-changing movement in the lineup. Michael Thomas, you just expect him to do this week in and week out, Scott.
Yeah, and that's what's impressive about Michael. And I think the number one characteristic, not the number one of the main ingredients, you have to be accountable, available to be a great pro athlete, but you got to be consistent. And that's the one thing about Michael. For the last 3 years, covering the Saints, seeing every rep they played, I've said to myself, why don't defensive coordinators double team him? Why don't they roll a safety to him? Teams are trying to take him out of games, and he still gets open. And if you watch him run routes, he's such a great route runner, and he's got such great size that when he breaks off a route, it doesn't matter who the DB is. They're either too small to defend him, or they're not fast enough to defend him when he runs those 10 to 15-yard intermediate routes. And his consistency, I think, is what defines him over these other receivers in the NFL.
All right, let's get to the defense, because I always like your take on that. I thought the defense in so many ways was impressive, but the most impressive part was the secondary. And my guy, PJ Williams, stepping up, moving from the nickel to your shutdown corner. And the stats amaze me. I mean, Marshawn Lattimore didn't play, but Marshawn Lattimore has had a great history against Mike Evans and shut him out in New Orleans earlier this year. How on earth does the secondary for the Saints, without Marshawn Lattimore, Scott, hold Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, arguably your top number 2 guy in the NFL, to one catch for 6 yards in the first half of that game?
I just think it speaks to the greatness of this team as a whole, and that includes the coaching staff. I think no matter who's out there, Coach Dennis Allen, he finds a way to show the strength of his defense individually and collectively. And this secondary has always been pretty good, but when you take a Marshawn Lattimore out, who's one of the best corners in the league, you expect to see some drop-off. Well, they blitzed a little bit more. They ran some different coverages on defense, and the one thing that helped, I think, the Saints' pass defense this past game was if you just watch the Saints' defensive line, you can take a guy out like Marshawn Lattimore and not miss a beat when you get pass rush like Cam Jordan and those guys got. Poor Jameis Winston, he had no time to look beyond 10 yards to throw the ball because there was a Saint player in his face.
Yeah. To me, the linebackers are such a huge story on this team. Demario Davis, we've talked about him. He's exceptional. He makes a big splash play seemingly every week. But the greatness of the Saints to me, and we've touched on this a little bit in the podcast, is they've not only hit on the draft in the last 3 years, but they've hit on free agents. I mean, they didn't know Alex Anzalone was going to go down this year. They get Kiko Alonso in the Dolphins garage sale earlier in the year. He had a great game this last game. He was all over the field, Scott. I mean, that's been a great pickup too.
Yeah, Kiko, the big knock on him, I think, is when they traded for him at the time and he didn't really have a role. He wasn't going to be inserted as a starter. And then they took a lot of his contract to potentially be a backup. But that, again, is some of the genius of the Saints defensive coaches. Dennis Allen, I watched multiple packages where different players came in. One time they'd be in a 4-3 defense and Kiko's on the field. He would go off when they went to nickel, and now you have Klein and DeMario on the field. Then sometimes they would come back with a 3-3 defense, and you have the 3 backers on the field in pass situations. So they're doing a good job of getting guys on the field to take advantage of the other team's fatigue, but take advantage of certain guys' strengths. And that's what a multiple defense does. And that makes it tough to get ready for multiple type defenses.
Yeah, it's top to bottom, very impressive. I mean, the D-line put a lot of pressure on Jameis. Did you feel sorry for Jameis a little bit? Did I hear that in your voice?
You know when Justin and I talked about this before we jumped on here, I think we both agreed. I felt sorry for Jameis. The only time I felt sorry for him was when he hurt his ankle and he was fighting through it and he was hobbling. I think to the core, Jameis is a competitor. We can all agree on that.
No doubt about that.
It's just those are the things that endear you to him as a fan and probably a teammate to him. It's just some of the other stuff that goes on that is hard to get past when you're talking about Jameis Winston.
Yeah, and he always handles the media well after a game. I mean, I think at the core, he's, he like you said, he's a competitor. He wants to win. He's a great team guy. He works hard and all these things, but some of the exterior stuff gets in the way. All right, let's move forward to the Carolina Panthers. And, Christian McCaffrey, I think the Saints are like the Patriots in a lot of ways where you got to take away the best player. They're going to try to take away Christian McCaffrey. I always think about this when they play Christian McCaffrey, though. How much fun would Sean Payton have with Christian McCaffrey?
You talk about a guy who would be tailor-made for the Saints offense. When you think about a guy who could stay on the field, run in between the tackles, outside the tackles, now you can keep him on the field, get him involved in the passing game. He pass blocks well, so he'll protect the quarterback. But everything he does well is exactly what when you think of Coach Payton's offense would excel in that type of offense. And that's why when the draft came out that year, you had a lot of people talking about McCaffrey and the Saints offense and how good he would look. I think the one thing that has shocked me about McCaffrey is he is a true bell cow NFL franchise running back. And a lot of people thought maybe he was just kind of a piece when he came out of the draft.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He's durable. And frankly, unlike Kamara and Barkley, who've been hurt, yeah, I mean, knock on wood, he gets banged up, but he plays every week. He's been pretty durable and extremely productive. I agree with what you said earlier, though. You hear about all these quarterbacks. You hear Mahomes, you hear Russell Wilson, maybe Deshaun Watson. But I like Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey. If I had a vote, they'd be up near my vote for MVP. I mean, those guys have really been productive. I know it's tough if you're a wide receiver and often a running back to win that award. Let's go to quarterbacks who often win the MVP award. You got old Kyle Allen, struggled against the Atlanta Falcons last week. First game as a starter in that Superdome. If you're Dennis Allen, how do you try to pick him apart?
Well, the thing that Kyle, to his defense, has played the Atlanta defense, who is resurging and played really good against the Saints, and then he went to Lambeau the week before that and had Carolina in that game due to his arm, and they came up short. So they're on a 2-game losing streak. It's going to be a tough game in the Superdome. What I think they're trying to do too much is, and it sounds crazy, Cam Newton couldn't throw the ball. He was hurt, whatever was going on. And it's almost like North Turner, their offensive coordinator, has been falling in love so much with the pass that they've gotten away from what they used to do as Carolina, and they were a 50-50 run-first team. And that's just way too much pressure to put on Kyle Allen. They cannot go into the Superdome and tell that kid, hey, you got to win the game for us. They have to run the ball, much like Atlanta did, try to take time off the clock, keep Drew off the field. If they don't do those things, I think the Saints will win and win pretty handily.
What happens if Kyle Allen struggles down the stretch and Cam Newton heals? I mean, a lot of us thought, Cam Newton has seen his last days with the Carolina Panthers. Is that going to make for an interesting offseason for this team?
I think it's going to be interesting regardless. I don't think, even if Kyle Allen really struggles and they lose every game going down the stretch, I still don't think Cam Newton is in the cards. To me, that franchise is thankful for everything he's done, but they've seen enough the last couple of years. He hasn't even been able to throw a 15-yard in route consistently. He is getting older. He doesn't want to run the quarterback draws and the quarterback sweeps. You have to move on from him. And if you're going to move on from Kyle Allen, there's going to be options. There's going to be options out there. It's just a matter of, do you want to wait for the draft? Do you want to? One guy, I think, and who's been getting a lot of heat lately, Mike, this is my prediction. I think the Chargers move on from Phillip Rivers, and I think Phillip Rivers ends up in Carolina, back home in North Carolina.
Ooh, wow, I really like that. Hot take from Scott Shanle. That's outstanding. And you know what? That makes a lot of sense because, he's still looking for that big postseason win in terms of making it. And they're built. I mean, with McCaffrey and improving defense, I love that. That's outstanding.
That's my hot take. Right. I hope it doesn't happen, but I think it's going to happen. I don't want to see Phillip Rivers. I'd rather see Kyle Allen or Cam Newton back in Carolina, honestly.
Breeze would probably feel like, God, I can't get away from this guy, man. He's shadowing me in the NFL. All right, well, Justin, I think we've squeezed as much toothpaste out of the tube. You know what time it is. You know what? I'm glad Shanle gives these nice long answers because it helps me change more likely during these podcasts. Sometimes I write down 3 questions and then I change them. I got a weird hypothetical to begin this. This is more likely 3 hypotheticals. We'll bring Justin back in. He will go first, then Shanle, then I will try to add something to the conversation. We're talking about Michael Thomas. Just baffles me, the numbers he's putting up. And I know it's the pass-happy NFL. But he's doing it better than any receiver in the NFL, and he's done it that way since he's came into the league. I mean, he's the fastest guy to all these receptions. It seems like he breaks a milestone every week. My first more likely, let's just say Michael Thomas, after this season, said, you know what, I don't want to play football anymore. He's like Calvin Johnson. He just said, you know what, I'm done. Does he go into the Ring of Honor, Justin Thomas?
I don't think so. Or at least not anytime soon, maybe way down the road. I think he would have to play at least 2 more seasons for that to happen. Obviously, his numbers are amazing and outstanding, but I don't think he's been a huge enough impact for the Saints for that to happen.
Let me sweeten the pot. Sweeten the pot. Okay. Let's say the Saints win the Super Bowl. This is why more likely it's fun because we can just do it whatever the hell we want to do. They win the Super Bowl and he breaks Marvin Harrison's record and he said, you know what? I got plenty of money. I'm done.
I think if he had some kind of huge pivotal changing moment in the Super Bowl that, changed the tide of the game to where the Saints won, I would say, yeah, maybe. I don't know. It seems like the Ring of Honor is such a special thing for players who've been here for a long time. I mean, Saints fans obviously love Michael Thomas, but I feel like 4 years just isn't long enough to have that kind of impact like some other players have had.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I'm looking at like Marcus Colston's numbers, and he's had 6 1,000-yard seasons. Thomas already has 4, and he already has this season 1,141 yards. And Colston in his best season had 60 yards better than that. I mean, the numbers are outrageous. So I'm just trying to kind of parlay off of that. Shanle, let's just
But Colston also, I was going to say, Colston also had a longer tenure with the Saints.
yes.
I believe 10 years, right? 10 years?
Yes, 10 years. And
So I don't know. I just feel like there's a longer time for him, even on maybe down years or years he was injured, but still overall to be a part of the Saints than 4 years.
yeah, and I see your point. I do think Colston should be in the Ring of Honor, as should Deuce, the all-time leading receivers. He scored the most touchdowns in Saints history, and then Deuce is the all-time leading rusher. Shanley, I'm just trying to think, just to show what Michael Thomas has done, if he wanted to just hang it up. What do you think of that notion? If the Saints won it all, Harris's record, is that enough, or does he have to give you more?
I'm going to say the only way I would say yes, first of all, the Saints Ring of Honor is extremely hard to get into. There's not many names up there compared to other franchises around the NFL. So they make it very, very selective and very tough to get into. I think a better question, Mike, if you said Mike played in the Super Bowl, won it, but on the last play of the Super Bowl sustained a devastating injury that he would never be the same, so he retired, I would say yes.
Ooh.
But if he walked away from the game, just walked away,
Right.
I would say no. Because right or wrong, every player has their own choice to walk away. But I think there would be some resentment from the organization, from fans, to put him in a Ring of Honor when you left the team kind of high and dry, so to speak. So if you just said, I'm going to walk away from the game because I won a championship, I got enough money, I don't think they would put him in just for that reason.
Interesting. You know, I'm just trying to keep up with your hot take on Phillip Rivers. That has mesmerized me right now. So that's why maybe I changed it to final hour, because I had another one that I didn't think was as splashy, I guess. But I agree with both you guys. It's not enough. But the reason I bring up that question, I'm just looking at his numbers, and it's just crazy how good they are. And it's, Marcus Colston, boy, he was so good. But that's recent history, and Thomas is just taken it to a different level, and he's hungrier after the contract. So I agree with you. It's not enough, but Shanley's scenario, I think that would definitely be the case because, the way the Ring of Honor is with the Saints, you saw it with Will Smith. There's a lot more than just what you played and the stats you put up. What Will Smith meant to that transition, the Sean Payton era, and his impact with so many guys in that locker room, it was more than football. And I remember when Morton Anderson, had his press conference, and Sean Payton got up there and he said, this isn't something we're going to do every year. I mean, it was really, really special. So I agree with you, Shanley. Something happened and there was a different circumstance. It'd be interesting to see what they do. All right, we talked about Colin Kaepernick last week, and he had his tryout, and a lot's been made of that. Away from the whole controversy with Colin Kaepernick, I see quarterback play around the league, and it seems like it's top heavy. You have the elite, you have the really good, and then you kind of have the rest. Give me an over-under. Do you think Colin Kaepernick, and let's take away the sideshow and all the controversy, if you just had him as a player now, sitting out for 3 years, you knew what he could do as a player, tryout, he looked like he was in shape. Over-under, is he better than 5 quarterbacks right now that are starting in the NFL, Justin?
I think if we wouldn't have had Michael Vick, who, for the dog fighting rings and whatnot, went to jail, the fact that he was able to come back, we actually talked about it not long ago, had a great season or two in Philadelphia, proved that even 3+ years out of the NFL, he could still play and had the talent. I think if we wouldn't have had that, I would have probably said no. But the fact that he showed that you could still do it after being out of the NFL so long, I could see Colin Kaepernick, if he was given the chance to play and start, I do think he would be more talented than at least 5 QBs in the NFL. I think he was so young when he was young enough when he stopped playing to still come in and have enough of an impact.
Yeah, especially the way offenses are. Shanle, before I get your answer, I thought we could almost get rid of more likely, and it'd be fun to do a greater than less than Kaepernick segment where we just go up and down and we go around a little bit. But do you think he's better than 5 quarterbacks in the NFL right now?
Five starting
Yes.
quarterbacks, right?
Yes, yeah.
I don't think he's better than 5 starting quarterbacks. I think there's a couple of teams that could use him that would be better. They would be better off than they are right now. I think he could be a backup on quite a few teams. But for him to be a starter, I don't see where it upgrades a lot of teams. This whole ordeal with this past weekend, I felt like if Colin Kaepernick would have showed up to Atlanta, went through the workout the league was putting on, you can't tell me that if he went and had a good workout, he would have got pretty good publicity from it because he attended what they set up. How do you not, as a Bears fan, say, why don't you sign him? Let's see what he can do over Trubisky. We're moving on from Trubisky. Why not bring Kaepernick in? When he went and did it, set up his own sideshow, that's where I think he forfeited any opportunity to get back in the NFL. It's just my opinion on that one.
I agree.
All right, if you're Tampa Bay, do you bring in Kaepernick when you have Jameis?
No, I don't think he would fit into that offense. And I just look at fits. To me, Chicago could use him in the way they run some of their college type stuff. You're not going to build your franchise in Cincinnati or Miami around Kaepernick. So I just don't think there's that many opportunities where he makes sense as a starting quarterback.
Let me give you one more. How about Carolina?
That would be interesting. That's probably one of those other situations where if he had a great workout and Chicago didn't call him, maybe Carolina brings him in as a backup. And if they stay in a wild card race, they give him some reps if Kyle Allen struggles. So that is a good one.
Damn, I'm still trying to keep up with the splash take on Phillip Rivers, man. Dang it, I can't get you. All right, our last one, and we tape these podcasts every Wednesday for the most part, so we didn't see the craziness that was Thursday Night Football last week when Myles Garrett, who, to my knowledge, is a pretty good guy, he read poetry by himself in his hotel room in Hard Knocks, has never had any issues, but just went friggin' crazy against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Mason Rudolph actually came out this week saying, I should have done a better job handling that situation. I have no ill will towards Myles Garrett, great respect for his ability as a player. And I know that if Myles could go back, he would handle the situation differently. I also saw Myles Garrett after that game, and I think he didn't really see the gravity of the situation, how crazy it was on TV I don't know. Yeah, obviously he's never been involved in anything like that. My question to you guys, he's been suspended indefinitely. Should that carry over into next season, or is the rest of the season enough?
Well, first I want to say, seeing that happen in real time, I had flashbacks of the Kyle Turley ripping the helmet off of a Jets player and throwing it. That's like the first thing I thought of.
But at least he threw it downfield.
That's true. He didn't hit someone with it.
Yeah.
So, this came out of nowhere. This is something I never would have expected out of Myles Garrett. I'm not saying I know him really well or anything, but he seemed like such a nice person. Like you said, Mike, someone who has a lot of respect. I don't even know what happened, but to me, it was very egregious. Mason Rudolph could have been really hurt much more than, obviously he doesn't seem to be hurt that much, but it could have been way worse. I think the NFL will reevaluate at the end of the season, but I do think he will be suspended potentially even more next season as well. I just think it's that bad, not only for him and what he did, but it's such a bad look for the NFL. I think they're really going to come down hard on him.
Yeah, that's great takes, Justin. Shanle, as a former player, first off, I want to get your reaction and then your answer. But, what were you thinking when you saw that? Did you see it live or did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it live, and I remember just being one of the times I've been the most shocked just watching a game as a fan when he swung that helmet, because I've seen a lot of guys fight. Guys get temperamental, not just in games but in practice. But everybody knows when the helmet's off, that's where your composure is regathered, and you have to be sensible about what's going on. A lot of times guys are tough because the helmets are on, but when the helmet comes off, I couldn't believe he swung that helmet. He's lucky he didn't make direct contact. That could have been even worse. But I think the NFL, they have two options here, and it's, first of all, when he swung the helmet, I thought he won't play the rest of the season. Sounds like he's not going to play the rest of the season, but now it's up to the NFL to decide, Do we suspend him the rest of the year and into next year so that people know how serious this is going into next year? Or do you just suspend him for the rest of this year, get over it, and start next year anew? To me, I think you suspend him this year and that's it. Because I don't know if it's good for the NFL for all offseason to have everybody with as much access, 24/7 networks, to talk about Myles Garrett all offseason and talk about what a bad look it is for the league. You don't want that negative news out there. So I think if Goodell is smart, which he isn't, you just do 6 games and you wrap it up in a bow and start next year anew.
Yeah, I think sometimes we get reactionary with this stuff. Let's just throw him, throw away the key and lock him up and all this stuff. Here's one thing I want to ask you about too, Shanle, before we get to our predictions. A lot of people say that was a criminal act. I mean, it's football, Scott. I know that was above and beyond, but a lot of stuff happens between the lines if you break it down that could be criminal. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, don't you think that is kind of getting carried away a little bit, or is it a criminal act? I mean, how do you look at that?
It all comes from there being no helmet. And when the helmet is off and things are done, people view Mason Rudolph without a helmet as a normal guy on the street. He's no longer protected. Football's done at that point when the helmet's off. And I never really thought Mason would gather a lawyer and sue him and this and that. Now the league, I think, was probably scared of that at the time. But there's a code, and you heard every former player, no matter where you watch, what network you saw it on the next day, when they reacted, they said, when you get into fights, when a helmet comes off, that's when it's over. And for Myles Garrett to not only not let it be over, but to swing a helmet and potentially cause serious injury to a guy, I think that's where you have to say there has to be the punishment definitely has to fit the crime, because most players, almost every player knows when the helmet's off, it's like you're standing on the sidewalk on the street somewhere.
Yeah,
but I don't know how someone could get suspended 4 games for substance abuse issue or whatever, and then someone who does something that bad only gets suspended 6 games. That just doesn't. I mean, I get what you're saying, Scott, and I do agree that if it continues in the off season into next year, it's not good, because you're right. That's all everyone will be talking about. But they don't seem like equal punishments, I guess is what I'm saying.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. There's a lot of punishments. There's a lot of fines that, if you look at the fine schedule, just don't add up. Like, for instance, I think it's absolutely asinine that a guy who makes $450,000 a year gets the same fine for a horse collar as a guy who makes $10 million a year.
Right.
I think fines should be based percentage-wise off a guy's salary if you really want to teach him a lesson.
Well, I think it's funny too that they have all these guidelines for uniforms and how you wear your socks and all this stuff, but they have no guidelines for suspensions for spousal abuse or drug abuse or all these other things. They're so inconsistent. I mean, how do you? I don't know. Goodell is such a pawn in the game of the owners. It's ridiculous. We haven't heard from him in a while. Seems like.
He's gearing up for he's gearing up for the next collective bargaining agreement, I guess.
I don't know, man. All right, well, let's get to our predictions. Justin and Scott are tied 2 games behind. You got to have to take some chances possibly. We'll see with this Saints schedule coming up. But Justin, what do you think?
I think the key to this game obviously is Christian McCaffrey. If the Saints can stop him both in the run game and the short and the intermediate passing game, I think the Saints win. The fact that it's at home, their last home game against a divisional rival didn't go well. I think they're going to want to prove to their fans, come out and show that they are the better team. I think it's going to be hard to contain Christian McCaffrey. I do think he's going to probably bust out a long play at some point, but I think the Saints win a pretty tight game. I'm going to go with, let's go with 28-24.
Saints. Wow. Okay. Shannon, what do you think?
Yeah, we're pinned in a corner now, Justin. We almost have to pick against the Saints. Nabors got a lead on us. To win this game, we have to hope the Saints crumble, which none of us are hoping for that. I'm going to go Saints. I think they're going to win 31-17. I've never liked the Carolina Panthers secondary. They have not drafted well or signed free agents. Besides Dante Jackson, for the LSU kid, he's an outstanding corner. They don't have the secondary to stop the Saints passing game. They've never built that team to stop the Saints. Let's not forget Kyle Allen. His first ever start was last year, I believe, in the Superdome, and he got a win against the Saints. So I think he'll be comfortable. He won't be awed by the situation that's at hand. But this Saints team is going to look to get back on a roll, and I think they're going to pull this one out.
Shanle loves that number 17, doesn't he? He loves it. And you know what?
And 31, right? Didn't you say 31 too, Scott? Wasn't that your?
It was.
I don't remember.
What was your score?
It was 31-30 last week.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm thinking of. Okay.
But I like the number 17 too. I actually wrote that down. But I think this. You know what? Maybe I'm jinxing this, but I am as least worried about the Saints as I have been in any other game this year. I really feel good about them this game. I think they're back on track. I think they're going to stop eating the cheese like they did against Atlanta. Even Drew said after the game in Tampa that the Falcons wanted that more. You kind of read between the lines their mindset entering that Falcons game. I think the Saints just go out and just blow them out. I think it's 42-17. I think both sides are feeling good about themselves. McCaffrey may get his, but it's not enough. They win 42-17, and the Saints improve to 9-2. And then we can all sit back on Sunday Night Football, and boy, who do you want to win that game? The Niners or the Packers? I think we want the Niners to win, right?
I would go with Niners. Yeah.
Yeah, because that separates us from the Packers.
Yeah. And when you look at schedules, the 49ers have the Seahawks and the Rams. They're more likely to lose some games. So I think you have to cheer for the Niners in that one.
Further proof Shanle does his homework. All right, well, that wraps up another podcast. Where are we on Twitter, Justin?
At Dundee Podcast.
And we're on all the platforms. Podbean, we're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on Spotify, we're on Google. So please subscribe, give us comments. We encourage your feedback. If there's anything you would like on the show, a guest you'd like us to bring on, questions for Scott Shanle, all of that, always let us know. But that wraps it up. We'll see how the Saints do. We'll see if they can move forward and get their 9th win of the season. For Justin Thomas, our esteemed producer, for our valued analyst, Scott Shanle, I am merely Mike Nabors. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.